Christian Concern are regulars on this show because they are warriors for Christ. They fight the good fight for the faith, regardless of, as we were just hearing about, cancel culture. Many battles on their plates. And we have Michael Phillips with us today to talk about a couple of them. Michael, thanks for joining us again. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, Bernard Randall is a priest, formerly in the Church of England, or I suppose still in the Church of England to some extent, that was serving in a Church of England school, gave a Christian sermon, pretty much outlining that one can choose to believe in trans ideology or not, one can choose to believe in Christian values or not, was sacked from his school. Referred to Prevent and other terrorist and extremist watchdogs, and for the most part was validated or vindicated or kind of released from those charges, except for the one within the Church of England. And now I understand he's still battling that with an employment tribunal, and you've got an update in this case.
Yeah, so there was an update. So Bernard's case was lost in the first instance at the Employment Tribunal, which is not at all unusual for these kind of matters. It was lastly discovered that one of the tribunal members, so you have a judge who's the one who sits in the middle, and you also then have two wingers, one of which represents the union side and one of which represents the employment side. So similar system I think they have in China. But anyway, so the one of the wingers was somebody by the name of Jed Perkins. And it wasn't discovered at the time. He didn't say anything about his background or his beliefs and so on. You think, okay, well, that's fine. Well, if you are able to judge impartially, then that's fine. And the fact that you are a lay member as opposed to a judicial member doesn't mean that you don't have to make any kind of declaration concerning your beliefs if you have a conflict of interest. And it transpired that Mr. Perkins, who was the non-legal member, made a number of interesting comments, which we latterly found out because he sat on another Christian Concern case. And he described conservatives as tumors. He said that social media timelines were clogged up with right-wing nut jobs. And in response to a comment that an atheist should be in public office, he said, "Damn right, you won't catch us killing in the name of our non-God." In response to a social media comments from a user that they find Christians worse than woke, he then said that if they are so effing super, how come there's so much shit going on in the world? And added that I need no higher power to tell me the right way to treat people and behave. And yeah, so he goes on, and he had a special place in his heart for Suella Braverman. He described her as nowhere on God's green earth would you find politicians as evil and stupid and repulsive as this effing ghoul. So that was just a bit of an insight into what he was prepared to say in public. And then this was a chap who sat in on Bernard's case. The matter then was appealed to the Employment Appeal Tribunal, and eventually the other side conceded, well, maybe Bernard didn't have a fair trial. And then on the morning of the appeal, then they conceded it and it was remitted. Remitted, that means just sent back. Eventually, they conceded, and so therefore they were punished with costs. And they've been ordered to pay £20,000 in costs for the costs of the appeal, because these things are not cheap. So that's what's going to happen. Bernard's case was sent back to the Employment Tribunal, and he's going to have a trial sometime in the near future, hopefully on this occasion in front of an impartial panel.
Does such a thing exist these days?
Well, I can tell you that we've had more recusal dinners. If I had a penny every time we had a recusal, then I would have I'd be a rich man. And so that's what's been happening in these cases, that nobody ever puts their hand up and says, by the way, just to let you know that I've got this potential conflict of interest that we've seen in these cases. However, what has to happen is that if, you have to do a bit of private detective work, and then you go through these people's social media accounts, and then you find out what they really believe or what they really think. And there have been, I think that this was number 4 in the last 2 years. And bear in mind that there's, not that many cases are being done. I know that the Christian Concern are always in the news, but we don't do that many cases. And of the cases that we do, so many of these wingers are just out there. The judges are a lot more careful. You won't find the judges, very rare will you find any judge on social media doing anything. But these wingers, they're more than happy to give you a piece of their mind.
I won't ask you to comment because I'm sure you probably couldn't, but it seems to me that these wingers, they're not impartial, they're not neutral, and they're out there with an agenda, an anti-Christian, anti-conservative agenda. And so that's why they remain silent and don't recuse themselves, because they want to punish us for being Christians and conservative. Um, and the comments that that one in particular person made about I don't need a God to tell me what's right or wrong or how to act towards people, clearly they do. If they're calling people nasty ghouls and evil and making such disgusting remarks against our elected politicians, shameful behavior. But you've had a similar case with the teacher that is known as Hannah. Now, this is the teacher that made a referral, a safeguarding referral, when she saw that an 8-year-old child was being
Mm-hmm.
transitioned in school. Quite responsible of her to do so. And she, what were the consequences that she faced, and where is she at the moment?
Yeah. So what happened with her is that she had she was employed in a primary school up in well, I can't really be too specific once again because of the various anonymity orders, but she was employed in a primary school, and there were concerns about a child who was going through a social transition at the time, and initially the child was in this lady's class. And then, so she had a few concern about that and raised it with the appropriate people, and was told, no, 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 it's all fine. And then, so she was then moved on to somewhere else. She was, and so she didn't have the teacher anymore. But the teacher, our client, continued to be really concerned about what was going on, because very often what happens at social transitioning can, in turn, lead to a medical transition and irreversible consequences for children. So she kept on raising this at various different levels, and she went higher and higher up in the school. And then she went to local authority, and eventually she instructed lawyers. And there was a case, a judicial review that was brought and was lost, and eventually she was sacked because it was found that or suggested that there may be a safeguarding risk as a result of her looking for evidence or looking on the school records concerning this child, because she was no longer this child's teacher. And so therefore she was told, well, that's it. You are a potential safeguarding risk because you're prepared to do that, because we don't see what the problem is, we don't see what the issue is, and so therefore she was then sacked. And that's the situation that she found herself in. So once again, we had an employment tribunal. It started, and then it had to be stopped because there was a winger who was once again on social media giving at large for their views, and so therefore the case mid-trial last time had to be aborted, and we are now here for the retrial, and the trial just started just the other day, and there was another recusal application, believe it or not, which was successful. So once again, one of the tribunal members was on social media and making various comments, which in certain quarters wouldn't have troubled anybody because they were a member of a union who had a very LGBT positive view, and we made the submission in those circumstances. It wasn't appropriate for the winger to continue. And on this occasion, the judge said, yes, that's right, and so that person was recused. I think that might be recusal number 5 or number 6 in terms of these kinds of cases. And so, yeah, so then they had to find somebody else. But anyway, that trial is now going on at the moment.
It baffles me that a teacher can be removed for safeguarding when the whole issue is that they had a safeguarding concern for a child. It's absurd. But the fact that these apparent biases keep cropping up, how can people have any faith, any trust in the judicial system, in the employment tribunal system? How? Because you guys are having to do investigative work to discover what's going on with these wingers. Not everyone has that capability. How can we trust our system?
No, it is extremely concerning. I mean, I think the thing is that these teachers and HR professionals and wingers and trade unionists just live very much in an echo chamber where there is just this mantra that, to be absolutely pro LGBT is no different to being an anti-racist. Nobody goes around, saying nasty things about, black people anymore. And likewise, nobody should go around saying nasty things about LGBT people. And so therefore, that is part of being a unionist. And so if one of the wingers is always going to be affiliated with the unions, it's absolutely likely that they're going to have somebody who has been standing, and usually these are not people in the lower echelons of the unions. These people have very often been assistant presidents or presidents, and they've been right at the top of the union, because that's why I guess that they've been selected to be wingers on an employment tribunal. So it's they've got a bit of status about them. So yes, so I think that they very much live in an echo chamber, and so this is why something like the Darlington Nurses Union has received so much support. So the Darlington Nurses Union was formed by, as it says on the tin, the Darlington nurses on a gender critical basis. Not all of them are believers, and they just decided to have a union that supports them. Because if you find yourself in trouble in front of and you get hauled up in front of your boss, probably an NHS trust or a local council, you can't have a lawyer. Somebody puts their hand up from Christian Concern, I'd like to come and help you. You can't go along. It's got to be a union member. And so for the first time ever, we've seen a union now with a gender critical framework behind them who are prepared to help people in these circumstances. And hopefully will cut these cases off at the root so they don't have to go all the way to an employment tribunal, because that's this is just hopefully this is a bit of a start where people can say, actually, I don't believe all of this stuff. I love LGBT people, but I don't necessarily agree with every aspect of the ideology. Okay, well, that's fine. You can join this union.
Well, I've got a two-parter for you, Michael, because surely the system needs to change in that everyone should have legal representation if they want it, if they need it, if they feel they need it. And so you shouldn't have to have a union representative. But also, when we come to the point of the employment tribunals, is the union winger supposed to be on your side, so to speak, or your advocate in some way?
Yeah, that was always the thinking. The thinking was that you're going to have a union rep, and they would understand the worker. And they would be a little bit more sympathetic. They would understand what it's like to be like. But in fact, very often when you turn up, you're looking at the employer in these kinds of cases, because the employer is generally speaking maybe going to be a little bit more understanding as to what position that you're in, and that's the that's the irony. But I mean, I think that there needs to be some type of um, verification of these people. So in America, they have a system now, which they used to have in the UK. They have a voir dire before you go on trial. You're allowed to ask questions of your jury. And so this is what we saw in Donald Trump's trial. You ask questions just to make sure that you are going to have a fair trial. In this country, they got rid of that, sadly. And so I think that they need to bring back a system whereby we can ask some questions of potential judges and potential wingers just to see what they believe in concerning these kinds of cases, because they don't self-declare. One thing is absolutely clear: they don't self-declare. They don't see that there's any kind of issue, even when they get the whole way through a case. We have to do our own research, and I think that is very concerning.
Well, with Reverend Bernard's case and with Hannah's case, you've got some evidence of that now. So I think you've got a case to put forward that something needs to change, and it has to either be the question stage that you talked about, or some kind of self recusal has to happen.
Yes.
You're also involved in the private schools land grab, as I call it, this where the government is trying to impose taxation on education in a way that
Yes.
hasn't been done before. How's that going?
Well, that is an extremely important case, and it's going to be listed before the High Court for 3 days, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of April. And the government is very concerned about this. They're absolutely throwing an army of lawyers to defend them. Normally you have one or two barristers, but they've got 7, including 4 King's Counsel, turning up to represent the government. But basically, it's about VAT on private school fees, because the government's words. Private schools have a tax break. They've got all these wonderful tax breaks. They used to get relief on business rates. They didn't have to charge VAT on their fees, and they've got these wonderful tax breaks. And the government want to see a bit of fairness, and they just want to put some more money towards mental health problems in the state sector. And so what they're doing is that they're taxing all of these, rich and powerful Christian schools, and they're just spreading out the wealth a bit more thinly. I mean that's the way that it may well be sold. But the truth of the matter is that Christian Concern are representing a group of really tiny diddy low budget Christian schools who are literally existing on a whim and a prayer that charge barely anything. The teachers barely get paid anything. The parents are scrimping and saving. Very often these have been set up in deprived areas, and and helping kids who've got a lot of issues. And they go to these schools. Very often these kids, sometimes who've been had all kinds of difficult situations. I can't go into the details, and they start thriving. And they do really well, and they've got a lovely environment, and they're saving the state so much money. But then we're told, no. What you can do is you convert and become a state school, despite the fact that that hasn't happened for about 10 or so years. And as soon as you become a state school, you can't employ solely Christian teachers. You have to abide by the state's rules. Maybe for the head or for the head of RE or a chaplain, you can make a requirement to be a Christian. But aside from that, the requirement to make all the teachers Christian or for teachers to be Christian is gone. And so what we are seeing across the United Kingdom is these schools are collapsing left, right, and centre. And because they're not making huge amounts of money. And what we will continue to see, if this is allowed to continue, is that there'll be second and third and fourth waves of parents who were kind of waiting to see what would happen with the court case, and then they go, no, VAT is sticking around, and relief on business rates is sticking, so we're not going to send our second child there. We sent our first kid but not our second kid, and so we're going to see further closures. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have you're going to have a rump at the very top of the richest schools, and then all those kids who are really struggling will be flung into the state school. And so actually you're increasing the divide between the rich and the poor. You're not decreasing it at all, unfortunately.
This is absolutely awful. I just want to make clear that private schools does not mean posh schools. Quite a lot of private schools charge very, very low fees. It's actually about parental choice. It's about allowing parents to choose what type of school to send their children to, a school that has the same values that they have, because children are the parents' responsibility first and foremost, and schools are supplemental. They're there to help parents. What this looks like to me is that the state wants to take over what remains of our private schools with Christian values, and therefore they all become state schools and they all have the state's values, which I would say at this point in time are very anti-Christian. This is an anti-Christian takeover of our education system, therefore an indoctrination of a generation of minds. It's absolutely disgusting to see this happening, and they're painting it as a compassionate kind of egalitarian approach.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what we're seeing. It is very much about parental choice. If these parents, who are very often not particularly well paid themselves, manage to scrimp and save a few pennies together in order to get their children the best education that they can, why should they be told no? You've got to go to the state school where we have a particular line of attack when it comes to, or a line of when it comes to RSE. No, we don't want to have that. We want to be able to teach our kids what we believe in our own time and reap the rewards of that, because the kids that go to these schools always do well, and unfortunately that choice is being taken away from the parents.
And the last two cases we talked about, the teacher Hannah had a safeguarding concern because 8-year-olds are being socially transitioned.
That's it.
Reverend Bernard Randall tried to provide choice and was cancelled through safeguarding concerns. State schools are not safe places for children if you want them to have Christian values. If you want them to be indoctrinated in trans ideology, they're great. But other than that, they're not. It's a grave concern. Michael, thank you for fighting this fight. We support you entirely. Where can people go if they want to contribute to Christian Concern or the Christian Legal Centre?
If they go to the Christian Concern website, please do support us and then sign up for the emails. You get a regular email. There are so many cases going on at the moment, so all the support and prayer and finance that can be given is very much welcomed. Please do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us today. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you for watching my Common Sense Crusade. If you'd like to watch the whole show, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 per month, and then you get access to a bank of content as well. My show is 3 p.m. every Thursday. See you there. Deus Vult.